My name is Tim Griffith. I am the program administrator for the STEM Teaching, Engagement, and Pedagogy program here in the TLPDC. I'm also a fellow with STEM Corps. My co-presenter is Dr. Jacqueline Conyers-Carroll.
I'm an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Toxicology. I'm also the associate director for STEM Corps, and I'm the head of the education committee of STEM Corps.
And so, and we have some lovely guests here, in addition to you all lovely guests. This is our student panel. We're going to introduce them here in a second. I kind of feel bad, Joe, like sitting here like a McDonald's hamburger on, it's on display for everyone. But we'll introduce y'all here in a second. But I want to go ahead and turn the floor over to Jacqueline for a second. So before we do that, I would like to help frame where we would love for your minds to be right now. We spent a lot of time talking about HSI, and we've talked a lot about grants and there being a new pot of money for HSI status. This is talking about serving. Our session today is talking about serving our students and what HSI means in terms of serving our students. So Jacqueline.
Thank you, Ken, and it's so great to see a good turnout like this. It's exciting that we're moving towards this HSI status, and so I'm going to talk briefly about what is HSI in case you haven't been to one of our HSI sessions. I should also mention that I'm on the president's HSI committee for the universities as well, so I kind of playing a double role here. So HSI, that stands for, probably all of you know, but in case you don't, Hispanic Serving Institution. And this is a designation that was created by the Department of Education to identify and then support institutions of higher education that provide post-secondary educational opportunities to Hispanic students. So there are about 435 HSIs across the nation. So that gives you an idea, and that's both 2-year and 4-year institutions. So what does it take to actually become an HSI? According to the Department of Education, you have to fulfill 2 things. So an enrollment of undergraduate full-time equivalent students that's at least 25% Hispanic. At Texas Tech, we can check that box. As of last fall, we were at 27.8% Hispanic student enrollment at the undergraduate level. So the HSI designation is only for undergraduate, it doesn't include graduate students. The second thing is a determination that the institution is an eligible institution. So it has the enrollment of disadvantaged students and low average expenditures per student. So there's a financial need component. Texas Tech has already been given a waiver for that because we don't have enough students that need Pell Grants and that kind of thing that qualify for that. So we've been given an exemption from the Department of Education for that particular requirement. This shows you the list of HSIs that are also R1 institutions. It is literally just 9 institutions. So Texas Tech isn't officially an HSI, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but when we become officially an HSI, we will become number 10 or maybe number 11 if somebody else gets in ahead of us. But this is a really small number of institutions that we will be joining. And I recently served on an NSF panel for the HSI program that just started for NSF. And it became very clear to me by serving on that panel that we are uniquely positioned because we already have a lot of the infrastructure that other HSIs do not. And when I mean infrastructure, I mean we have an Office of Research Services who can handle your budgets, who can do all bunch of things that a bunch of HSIs across the nation do not have. Okay, so we're going to be so that means what we need, so a lot of the HSIs are applying for money for infrastructure to build up their research capacity. Here, we're going to have to be innovative, and I think where we're going to have to put our energy is in the classroom and how do we develop. And there's going to be money from the Department of Education for like student support services that, but as faculty, and in the classroom, people teaching, this is where we're going to be able to put our focus and our energy and go after money I know he said we're not talking about money, but to provide these opportunities and improve our classroom and our teaching, because you'll see today, based on the data that we know that's been collected on how underrepresented students learn, that it's going to be really important that we put forth the efforts to do that in the classroom. Okay. So benefits of the HSI status. Once we become official HSI, which we're anticipating should be May of 2019, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, we will then be eligible to apply for Title III and Title V Department of Education grants that are specific for HSIs. And then there's also, when it comes to the other federal agencies, so the Department of Education and the National Endowment for the Humanities, so the NEH, those are the only two that we are aware of at this point that actually care that we don't have Department of Education status when it comes to grants. All the other agencies consider us an HSI because we have met the enrollment, period. Okay, so that basically means if you leave here today with an idea and you say, this is how I want to transform my class, and maybe I can find money to help implement that, or I want to start a mentoring program, I want to start an undergraduate research program, these agencies will consider us an HSI for those purposes. Okay. And then, so if we get this question a lot on the HSI committee, are we HSI yet? No, technically not, because we aren't Department of Education approved. So we're not, Department of Education has this website that lists all of the HSIs, and we're not officially on there yet. But we have surpassed the minimum enrollment that we need. We do have the waiver for the financial need of our students. And basically what's happening is it's this IPEDS data that's holding up our final approval by Department of Education. Because right now they're looking at data from, I believe, the 2016-2017 enrollment. So it's based on the fall 2016 data. So we have to wait for it to be based on the fall 2017 data, which is going to be submitted this next year, and so, or this year, and so we anticipate by next May that we will officially say, yay, we officially are an HSI in the Department of Education's eyes, and we're on their official website. Okay, yes, question.
Is that then a yearly status going forward?
So,
or would it change year by year?
Yes, so she asked, is that a yearly status going forward year by year? We have to apply every year. So we have to maintain our enrollment, okay, is the big thing. And that's why we're having this session today, because to maintain the enrollment means we have to retain our students. And in order to do that, we're going to have to change how we approach things. I really do believe that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, which will probably be the really fun part, I think, of the day, is listening to some students who have agreed to serve on this panel. And we have provided them with some questions ahead of time so they could reflect on those, and so they wouldn't be put on the spot because they're students and they were worried about that, right? So we have here, and they didn't sit in order, but that's okay. So I'm going to let them actually introduce themselves. I think I got their majors right up there, but you can tell them like what your major is, where you're from,
My name is Monica Garcia. I am from El Paso, Texas, and I'm a biology major.
And your classification.
I'm graduating. I'm a senior.
Hi, I'm Samantha Soto. I'm also from El Paso. I'm a junior, and my major is microbiology.
My name is Miguel Jaimes, and I'm a civil engineering major from Dallas, Texas, and I am a junior.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And I told you they don't all have to answer every question, so if somebody doesn't answer, that's okay. All right, so the first question for you all is, as a Hispanic student, what do you wish your professors knew or understood about your background?
So for me would be, I feel like a lot of Hispanics are first generation students. And when I first came here, a lot of the population was American, so I feel like the professors assumed that we kind of knew what to do, when in reality, my parents kind of also just threw me in here and like told me to figure it out in a way. So one of my biggest problems is time management, and a lot of students have heard about this from their parents. And since my parents never told me about this, I struggled with it my first couple semesters. And that just, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add, on top of being first generation, it's really hard. You really don't know a lot of kind of the advantages that some students already know. I mean, we had like SI and stuff, but personally, I wasn't really given like the confidence to talk to professors in like office hours and to have like questions, you know. And then aside from that, you know, also being first generation like STEM is an extra, I think, disadvantage that we have, just because our parents aren't really, they want to help us, they just don't know how, and we have that support, we just don't have really the resources, and I think we're all very much nervous and scared to approach our professors and to kind of ask these like silly questions, that in the end, you know, it took me like 2 years to really get up the courage to talk to professors with confidence, and it's been super beneficial, and I wish I'd come into college knowing that.
Sam, you have anything to add?
Well, on top of that, I feel like, having the resources available to us is, like they said, it's not, we don't really know what we're getting into once we come in. So sometimes I felt like when I was in class, like some of the things we should already know from high school, I didn't know. So it's also like having to catch up with like the rest of the students, because there's a missing portion of my education from like where I went to high school, and it's not the high school's fault, it's just the way it was. So like having to catch up with like classes and stuff, and like knowing what kind of learning, like the best way that I learned was also a struggle, because I mean from high school to college it was a big adjustment. And on top of that, being away from family, as Hispanics we are very, very close to our family. And so being apart from that was also like an adjustment. So I guess just being aware that we want to be here and that we are willing to like put in the extra work, but it will be like a little bit of a struggle in the beginning. I guess that's what I would want my professors to do.
Okay, thank you. Oh, was there a question? Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you think employing team-based learning and putting you into a group with other students, would that help? Is that helpful to be, okay, you're on a team, you see how they handle questions and problems, or is it a problem?
I feel like maybe in the beginning it would be more beneficial. I don't know, but I feel like maybe at those times where I am shyer and, you know, more unsure of what to do, I do think that might be beneficial.
Do you feel like you've been able to catch up in the sense that you said when you came in there were a lot of things you didn't know? So now Monica's at the end of her time, and the rest of you are juniors. Do you feel like you've been able to bridge that gap and you've been able to go forward?
Yeah, I think I have personally. I think part of the struggle early on made me have to go out and find resources for myself and have to go and like ask for things myself. So I think that like opened many opportunities for me, and I feel like that really helped like bridge that gap. And
For jumping off of that question, for first-year students who are less motivated, do you have any advice on how we could help them to overcome that deficit? Because what I would be afraid of is that they would find it too overwhelming and they would drop out.
I think it's definitely discouraging to come in and see that, you know, you kind of feel like everyone's already at an advantage. But for me, it was really, I had to struggle a lot in class for me to realize that, you know, what I'm doing, what I did in high school, my, you know, barely getting by isn't cutting it here. And so I really did have to struggle very much in my and it was with the motivation of teachers, you know, and the faculty that really helped me kind of push forward, and it was very difficult in the beginning. But like Sam said, when you kind of realize that there are these resources, I feel like we took it and we ran with it. We didn't, and we are very motivated, but I think it was also like once you realize that there are resources out there for you, it really helps.
Can you elaborate on what resources, and like, would it be helpful if those were listed like just in a tab on the Blackboard page? Like, are they websites, or are they people, or are they items?
That's actually our next question.
Oh,
Very
wonderful.
good. So, yeah, she framed it just exactly as we had. Any resources that, oh, yeah, sorry, did you?
Did any of you take the Radar Ready class, and is that a question, or?
Yeah, did you take the
Did anyone take
class?
Radar
Did it
Ready
help?
class? Yes.
I did, and I honestly didn't feel like it was very helpful. I feel like most of the stuff was kind of like you hear from high school, but not go into detail where you have to kind of like learn it yourself. I remember there was a section with like finances and counting your money and stuff like that. And it was all kind of like basic, but not like into actual detail.
Were you introduced to the Red to Black organization on campus during that section?
No, I didn't hear to Red to Black until probably my sophomore year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'll just ask the question again, that way we come back to it. What resources do you think the university should offer to Hispanic students or students in general to help them and others succeed? Because you've all mentioned like there need to be more resources, or you didn't know, not that there needed to be more, but you didn't know what resources. And so maybe by telling the audience what resources you think would have been good for you to know, maybe then we can brainstorm like, this would be the most efficient way or the best way to get the information to the students early on.
I think one of the best resources we have that I never used, honestly, are the mentoring programs. I feel like if I would have joined the mentoring program my freshman year, I would have started off a lot better, because they kind of like guide you through it rather than being thrown in there. It's kind of like having that parent telling you, kind of giving you advice on what to do. And I think promoting those mentoring programs, either in orientation or in, for example, the freshman readiness class, would be good.
Yeah, mine was definitely a mentor program. I was in Mentor Tech, and I wasn't in it until my sophomore year, but I really wish I had begun my freshman year. They pair you up with a mentor depending on your major and your path, and it was really helpful. They got me into undergraduate research that I didn't even know existed or was an opportunity, and it really gave me that kind of stepping stone into the direction. He knew the direction that I wanted to go to, and they really facilitate that.
Yeah, I feel like where I knew about most of the resources here on campus were through student organizations. So I joined SACNAS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science. And through that organization, that's where I knew that undergraduate research was a thing. I didn't know that was an actual thing until I came here. After I started getting interested in like being involved in the research lab and all of that. They also provided like information sessions about like the GRE and like the MCAT, and those are some of the things that we don't know about, and like that there's like books to study beforehand, and it's not just a test that you take, and not everybody has to take that test unless you're wanting to go to a higher education. Another resource I used was like the supplemental instructions. I find those very, very helpful. Having a student like put into different words what we're learning in class and having it refreshed is very, very helpful for me.
And I guess to kind of go back to the question where to find motivation for students, I know one of the things that motivated me the most was last semester when I went to the SACNAS conference, and that's because we hear all these talks about from Hispanics of the things they've achieved. So hearing all those talks, kind of like, you know, I can do that too. Why should I not be motivated? And I think having similar talks to those here on campus would be pretty awesome, I think, because you can get students motivated without having to go to a conference or just being here at the sub or something like that.
Yeah. Going off of that, SACNAS, I'm part of the organization and part of the officers. We host a member from the SACNAS, and they're already professionals, so they come to talk to our members about like their story and how they got to where they are. And I find those very, 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 very motivating because they know this kind of the struggle that, because they went through the same struggle that we are going through right now, and they made it. So seeing that and seeing how like even through the struggle they still were able to make it and they were still able to make something amazing with their life, that gives me motivation to continue going even though like right now I'm struggling or like I feel like I shouldn't be here or something like that. I know that like this will help pave the way for more people after me to come, and I think having those more available like university-wide, I guess. Like I know we have like events at the sub or like magic shows or something. Maybe like instead of a magic show, having like a Hispanic person, professional, come talk to us, come talk to the students to let them know like the struggle and like that they were able to make it will help them like find that motivation.
Sorry, yeah, I think, well, actually we had the question up here first, yeah.
Quick question about the mentorship. I assume you're assigned with one person, right? Is it someone, you said from your major, so at least you know what you're going through. Is it someone from your town, from your home, from your community, or?
No, so it's a professional here in Lubbock that has already kind of achieved that, you know, what you want. So Mentor Tech has a plethora of people from all different majors that are actually, you know, successful, like pharmacists or whatever, and they
So
will guide.
it's not a student.
No, they're professional, so they're grad student, faculty, or staff serve as the mentors for Mentor Tech.
I wonder if it'll be good to have a senior student,
Actually,
Hispanic
yeah, like a
student.
peer mentoring kind of program.
There's
Yeah.
one for fresh generation engineering students. I'm a mentor for that program, and it's for transfer students and for freshmen. And we help them like with that transition because it's a big transition, and we help them with like if they struggle with a class, we can help them tutor them, or if they need advice in registering what classes, we help them with that. So it's, I think that's one.
So
of
it
the
exists?
Yeah.
That's
At least
great.
in engineering, I think Dom.
Yeah, that's actually going to be my question. So sort of turning this around, you've all been helped by mentoring programs yourself. So would it then help, say, in your junior and senior year to turn around and sort of mentor freshmen or even mentor high school and middle school students in the town? Because would that give you more confidence in yourselves in terms of telling your story, or would it be more stressful?
I think like the senior program, I think if the biology department had something like that, I think that would be really great. Just registering for classes is so stressful. But you know, just like the little things that we kind of already know, you know, don't be on campus to register for classes, or you know, something like that. I think that little bit of help really, you know, does encourage us a lot.
And I think you mentioned middle school and high school. I know in SACNAS we brought it up once to maybe start like a mentoring program for middle school and high school students, not only for them but also for their parents, and have like Spanish and English info sessions so that they can start knowing from the beginning before they go into college.
Because you would probably be less scary to the parents than, say, professors and people who go out and talk at them. You could say, hey, we made it, your kids could do it too.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd like to add to what you were saying. So, so I want to clarify, Mentor Tech doesn't have student mentors, but it does have PAC leaders. So the way it's designed is that the PAC leader can be a resource, but they aren't a person that's like assigned to a particular student. So there is a mentorship type of environment that is created there. Another thing is that I actually have a Hispanic student who is currently involved in both the first generation and in the mentor tech, and it's incredibly overwhelming for her to, there are requirements that you have to satisfy for both, for these organizations. This on top of an already very rigorous curriculum can be, and in addition to possible need to find work, is just, can become unachievable for the student very quickly. So something that is more concentrated or streamlined, I definitely think both of those programs are fantastic programs. I've heard great things about both of them, and I participated in Mentor Tech a while. But I think trying to do both could be challenging.
Yeah, I've heard that from students before.
I've heard about the first generation mentor program, that the groups are really big. So they don't get that very personal relationship with their mentor. So some of them just stop going. And so what I like about the engineering mentor program is that I have 2 mentees. So it's like I only meet with them so I can help them more rather than a group of 50 people. So I think having smaller groups helps you concentrate more on like what their questions are.
This one might be a little bit difficult to answer, but it kind of goes with Dr. Galhan. So, like, if we had these seminars or talks and stuff, which would be fantastic, how would you get students to go if they weren't motivated or they were already scared? Like, right, so say you're a freshman and you get an email with a flyer, hey, there's this Hispanic speaker, come and listen, and most of them will delete it, or most of them won't read tech announce, or like, so how do we engage them, right? How do we do that? How do we snag those students and get them to feel like the community? Because like, would you have gone your first semester, your freshman year? Because now you obviously would, so it's super helpful. But like, how do we get them there, right? How do we get them to move from the I'm shy and nervous and overwhelmed to I'm gonna participate? Like, what can I do? Because I feel like when I send out announcements, students just ignore them. That might not be true, but that's what I'm thinking. So.
I think maybe having like a small committee with students in it that can, like, even in the free speech area, like promote it, and they can tell their experience of how, like, what they've grown. I mean, how they've grown from those talks.
And I think professors are generally very intimidating. So like Miguel said, no offense. But I think students are, it's, you know, if I were to tell, or if Miguel were to tell his mentees, you know, this program is really great, you guys should come with me. That kind of, you know, come with me and we can, you know, if you have questions, we can talk to her about it. Or, you know, this presenter is going to be really great, I think you would really enjoy it. That kind of peer mentorship is really, it encourages us to have the courage to attend these things and kind of branch out like that.
And I think also, I know a lot of professors don't do this, but maybe in a way, not force it into them, but like offer like a small extra credit or something. Like students will do anything for extra credit, so they'll go and so they'll like actually gain something from that extra credit and not just sit there. So I think that'll be
maybe also speaking to like the presidents of student organizations that are like minority based, I think that would also be helpful because they're getting it from like a student rather than like a staff member.
You all about me.
But you've got to find the
Right, I've got to pass it down the chain.
Yeah. Yes.
Since we're talking about how to fix resources that we already have, that's kind of what we've been talking about. The supplemental instruction program is, you said it's very beneficial. I mean, how many students can afford to pay private tutors? Well, we have a problem with that supplemental program. I can't get an SI instructor for cell biology. I mean, there's not many people that need tutoring in that subject, but this is supposed to be a joke.
Okay, breezing through that
I
one.
can't get the people that were previously supplemental instructors make more money as a private tutor. And so then that deprives students that can't afford those tutors. So we need a grant idea is to get more money
Yeah,
into
'cause
that
I
program.
can't get one because I don't fail enough people, so I'm not allowed to have an SI.
So there's like, okay.
Is that
I
right?
have,
That's
yeah.
sad. I mean, that's really.
Yeah.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm
There's
not-
like a qualifier, like you have to fail enough people.
Uh-huh.
for us?
I'm like, I have too high of a pass rate, I can't have an SI.
Fail some more people.
Like, yikes. Okay, this is good that we.
Would it be helpful along those same lines if we had SI sessions that were run by Hispanic undergraduates specifically, so that when somebody comes in, they don't see, you know, a privileged white male, for example, you know, in front of the room? Would that be helpful? Would that give more buy-in and overcome the fear, or does it matter at all?
I don't think it would matter too much for me. I think we kind of separate like academics from.
Personally?
Yeah, I think I was always taught that school is like an evening playing ground, and you know, you just have to work just as hard as everyone else.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're talking about 27.8% of our population is Hispanic. Within STEM, how many students does that mean?
You know, I
That's
thought about
on-
that when we were
that's on
going to, because I was like,
campus
that's one
and it's
number we did not look
directly
up for you.
associated.
Unfortunately, getting to a specific number is difficult because the definition changes a little bit. What is STEM,
Yeah.
first of
Yes.
all? And then,
Yeah.
and then
Well,
you introduce STEAM, and,
yeah,
you
that's
know, then
huge.
it's like pickup sticks, right? And so it's a difficult number to probably pinpoint. So I don't really know what that number is, and I don't know that IR would necessarily have
so-
a number on that.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but, so as part of our LSAMP grant, so Lewis Stokes something, from NSF. So we have a pre-alliance planning grant, and I'm on that, so I should be able to answer this question, but it's been a long time since we submitted that, so the numbers. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but we definitely, like, I can find that and send it to this group, because I know that we know the numbers. And we've been able to show NSF that we actually have, like, a critical enough of a mass here that, but we've got a long way to go as far as, because we had to put information in there like time to graduation, persistence, all sorts of things. And so we have that data for, let's see, so probably 2011 to 2016, we have the data and extensive tables that IR helped us to pull together, but that we turned into tables that went to NSF. So we know those numbers,
I'll
and
have your emails, and I can
we
make sure
know
you all
that-
get that information.
we know that we've got the population to serve. Yeah, we definitely do within STEM.
Yeah, we just went through a similar process in arts and sciences because we did a big NSF STEM proposal, which involved biology, chemistry, geosciences, physics, mathematics, and at least in those STEM disciplines, from what I remember, the participation of underrepresented minorities in general and Hispanic students was slightly higher than for the rest of the college. So I don't remember the exact number, but in general, you do have high participation in STEM fields.
And I know that engineering, actually, I just remember the associate dean for undergrad education telling me that they actually have a high percentage of Hispanic students in the College of Engineering.
Right,
Yeah.
so the point that this gets to is, in terms of these resources in undergraduate research, how can we effectively help Hispanic students to be able to access these programs when the numbers are, from a faculty point of view, are overwhelming?
Yeah, so I guess we can leave that to the discussion at the end, right? Because
Sure.
that seems like a question for our audience, because I'd like to get to one more before they
We're gonna
have
have
to.
plenty of time for discussion.
Yeah, okay.
And
So hold
we
on
can
to
get
that,
there.
but people can be thinking on that, like how, and I think the answer to your question is going to be grant writing and getting resources from NSF, Department of Ed, anybody, USDA, anybody that'll give us money so that we can build that infrastructure, and then we have to think about sustainability, but people can think on that. So the last question I'd like to get to before we let you all go, is who is someone at Texas Tech who has been a role model or encouragement to you in terms of your academic success?
So personally, I've been really lucky to have a lot of like role models and help here at Tech. Dr. Castante was a freshman chemistry teacher for me, and so that was, like I said, one of like the struggling points in my life, and or in my academic career, anyways. And with the help of office hours and a lot of crying, I was able to kind of learn those skills to overcome these obstacles and, you know, realize that you're not always the smartest person, but it's okay and you can work to be the smartest person.
Mine would be the coordinator for the mentor program. She's been kind of like a mentor for me, and since I never had a mentor before, she kind of like, whenever I have like struggle out, like either email her or go to her office, and she's always available. And she's really nice, and she's always like, every time I struggle with, okay, so I have all this stuff to do, this is more important than others, like how do I organize myself, kind of stuff like that. I'm still kind of working on it, so she's been really helpful, and that, yeah.
For me, Dr. Cañas and Dr. Papas, they were the advisors for SACNAS, so I got to get really like close with them, and they really encouraged me to like keep being what is it? Like yeah, like they motivated me to keep striving for more and to keep going for things that I deserve, which like was kind of hard for me to like see at the beginning, but to like keep going and like not giving up and
So are there any additional questions for our panel from the group before we give them the opportunity?
I'm just curious, what are your plans for the future? Did I miss that?
They didn't say that, but thank you for asking.
Okay, your plans for the future.
Currently, I'm going to be continuing here at Texas Tech. I'm going to get my master's, and then I hope to go on to medical school.
Wonderful.
I want to go into graduate school. Not sure, for sure something in research, but not sure how to get there.
And she's doing an REU this summer in Oregon, so that
wow.
experience should help her to
Yeah.
kind of
Wonderful.
decipher which route she really wants to go and what discipline. Kind of, yeah.
Mason?
I graduate May 2019, so after that, just start working.
He's an engineering major, so he
Yeah.
wants to get straight into the work.
You've had your internship, correct?
I'm having it this summer in Brazil.
In Brazil.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
She's from the Career Center, so that's why she's asking. So she's like, where are you going? Okay, any last questions? All right, well, let's all join us in thanking these students.
Yes. So please, you guys grab a sandwich, and I've invited them to stick around if they can, but we also know they have classes, etc. So if they need to peace out, we totally get that. But we'd love for you all to be part of the conversation for the rest of our time. But if you can't, we get it. So that takes a lot of guts, everybody. So we're really appreciative for them to sit here, as I said, like a McDonald's hamburger, and have y'all pepper them with questions. So we appreciate them very, very much. So, and thank you, Jacqueline, for that, for facilitating that discussion. Okay. So, to move forward, this idea of serving people, we have to know where we've been, kind of where we are, so that we know where we're going, right? So to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we are, I'm going to offer some statistics that will help kind of illustrate this point. So you may not realize this, but non-URM students and URM students enter STEM at the same rates. But they don't necessarily get through STEM at the same rates. So we see here, where's the giant finger? Giant finger. The reflective surface of the laser doesn't work, so we have a giant finger. So the key bar here, roughly 15%. These are 2010 data. This was actually a 2016 publication based upon 2010 data. But in 2010, we saw there are roughly 15% of the bachelor's degrees that were conferred were for URM students.
This
Now,
is national data?
This is national data, yeah. Yeah, it's based on all these tables from US Census Bureau. And so that's an interesting number to me. Now, if you look at this, you may have heard the pipeline metaphor. There are pros and cons to the pipeline metaphor, and I'll talk about that very briefly. But the pipeline, quote unquote, that you hear about is from bachelor's to faculty, right? So if there are 14.7% that graduate with bachelor's degrees, then we see that number slowly dwindle to faculty, assistant professor, right? Now that's going to be consistent across the board, right? But the problem with the pipeline metaphor is that it's assuming that everybody wants to become a faculty member, right? So you could end up with a master's degree and become a CEO of a pharmaceutical company, but somehow you're a leak, that you somehow fell out of that pipeline. So that's the problem with the pipeline metaphor. But these numbers are still informative. So we also know that women, underrepresented minority students, and FGCs, that's first generation college students, and students with low income backgrounds tend to leave STEM at higher rates. And what's interesting is that oftentimes our students with low income backgrounds are also URM students, right? And so that was from a 2013 report from NCES. Now, why is that? Well, one reason they could be leaving is because they're working, right? And so, sure, it's possible that students, could be working to afford that, new TV or whatever. But in reality, there's a lot of students that are working because they have to afford tuition, they have to afford books, they have to, in some cases, Jacqueline has even pointed out with students she's talked with, have to send money home. Part of being able to go to school, part of a condition to be able to go to school is that they have to help with some of the bills at home. That is a lot to put on a kid, right? And so, as a result, if they're working 30, even 40 hours a week, the obvious outcome of that is that they have less time to study. But a critical piece that we've talked a lot about here and that we've listed there in terms of resources, it also means that they're not able to participate in co-curricular activities. And we know from the data that students that are able to participate in co-curricular activities do better. And to plug co-curricular activities, Erin Justina and Jeremy are both here from CalU, Center for Undergraduate Learning.
For Active Learning and Undergraduate Engagement.
Learning and Undergraduate Engagement, thank you, CalU. I'm sure that they would love to talk with you more about some different ways of engaging students in co-curricular activities. But we've talked a lot about them: mentor programs, mentor tech, student organizations. So there's a number of resources out there. But if they're working all the time, they're just barely going to be able to study. And then adding co-curricular activities is probably just not going to be tenable. So we know from PCAST, so President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, this was kind of the, that is kind of the seminal report that a lot of what we're talking about today and a lot of what the national conversation is about in terms of STEM retention and student persistence. That's kind of the report that everybody points to first. If you read any sort of report that has occurred since then, that is usually cited within the first paragraph of it. So President's Council of Advisors, Science and Technology said that students tend to, the first 2 years is crucial to their success to persist to graduation. And so what's happening in those first 2 years that either leads to success or leads to them either leaving STEM, or what's worse than leaving STEM? Leaving college, period, right? So here's a slew of citations that tell us why they're leaving. So they're leaving including, poor teaching, poor performance, inadequate advising, so-called gatekeeping courses, just general loss of interest because of all these other things, imposter syndrome in that I don't feel like I should be in this room with these other people. I don't deserve to be here. Poor classroom climate. you know, 500 people in a room is kind of a sketchy climate to begin with, and then, you know, then you add the factors that might exacerbate that. And then, of course, gender, you know, the classic so-called gender and ethnic biases that exist. So, again, we're thinking about where we are and where we've been.
And can I point out one
Please.
thing? So
Yeah.
that list, so you may have students that encounter one thing on that list, and you may have students that encounter everything on that list. So it runs the full gamut, but for some students, it takes literally one of those things.
Thank you. That's an important point. Comorbidity. So, how do we serve our students? Again, Hispanic serving institution. So from this point forward, we're going to talk about how we fix some things, how we move forward, how we address some of these factors that we talked about where we've been and where we are now. So Estrada in 2016 and colleagues talked about two kind of primary things that we can do to help move forward. One is to remove institutional barriers. That's a big ask, right? The other is to, and I loved the word that they used in their publication, that's why I put it in quotes, lift students' interest, commitment, and abilities. That's a cool way to put that, lift their abilities, right? Removing institutional barriers, that's, I think Dr. Skubinik's, that's his job. So we're gonna focus here, you know, on this, because we are on the ground, boots on the ground, we are working with students every day. So we may have some influence on institutional barriers, but where our big influence is when we get to talk with our students and we get to work with them in classes. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So we know from two of Estrada and colleagues' publications, one back in 2011 and one in 2016, we know that the data that they collected, they showed that students tend to persist if they are engaged with the material that's towards working toward a solution that is kind of quote unquote real world, right? If it's part of their community, if it's a global challenge, such as healthcare, you know, so Lubbock's, you know, three big things that Lubbock is known for is agriculture, our healthcare, machinery, and of course Texas Tech, right? And so that runs our economy. Well, that covers a lot in here in terms of renewable energy, clean water, health, and then within health, you think about health disparities, you know, from various socioeconomic status, from ethnicity, from gender, etc., rural health and medicine. A lot of students come to Tech because they want to give back to their community in a tiny farm town. There may be, you know, not many resources for mammograms or for cancer screening and things like that. And so they want to give back to their community. So if we can help them through our curriculum and our courses, through case studies, something like that, if we can come up with ideas to link our students to community, to factors that are important in our communities, that is helpful, according to Estrada and colleagues. So one other thing that we can do is this idea of advisement and career advisement and academic advisement. As we grow, we're trying to get to that magic 40,000 mark, right? There's only so much real estate. There's only so many resources in terms of people to help support that 40,000 number. So I know coming from the Department of Biological Sciences here at Texas Tech, there are roughly 1,500 majors. There's 4 specific majors, but all encompassing those 4 majors, there's 1,500. There are 2 academic advisors. They can only do so much. They're mostly checking boxes, and they're making sure that students are on track and that they're taking the class, and there isn't going to be some magical class that pops up at their last semester that they forgot to take. They're trying to fix all that. They can't talk about career advisement. They can't say, you know, student comes in and they say, I want to go to medical school. That's great. What's your backup plan? They don't have time to do a lot of that. And students, since y'all are still here, please feel free to jump in on that. It's just not, again, it's untenable to ask two staff members to do that with 750 students. So where where does that put us? We're supposed to help. If we have the opportunity, when I have a student that comes in and talks to me with office hours, the first thing I ask them is, what do you want to do? Why are you here? What's the plan? So I teach a human physiology course, and most of my students are pre-nursing, but not necessarily all of them. I can't make that assumption. So I ask them, what do you want to do? What's your backup plan? Do you have 2 or 3 things that you might want to do? Why do you want to do that? Because maybe they want to do something and they just don't know what it's called. You know, like occupational therapy is one that a lot of students say they want to do OT or PT or something like that. Do they know what an occupational therapist actually does? Because maybe they want to do something and they're just thinking nursing is the best way to get there. But really what they want to be is an occupational therapist. That would be great if advisors could do that, but they can't necessarily. So that's something that we can do as staff and faculty when we're working directly with our students. And we'll have time for everybody to talk about different ideas on that too, here in a little bit. So what's something else that we can do in our classrooms? Well, we're doing TLPDC, so you have probably heard the term active learning before, right? So active learning, if you don't know what active learning is, and we can't go into a whole lot of talk about active learning, so that's a whole other workshop. Freeman 2007, if you're interested, look that up or just shoot me an email and say, hey, would you send me Freeman 2007? That is kind of, at this point, dogma. And it's a great paper where they looked at 250 institutions on what active learning is. So, and active learning is not just effective in STEM. Active learning is effective across all disciplines. But we're focusing primarily here in STEM. The interesting thing about this concept of active learning is that it benefits all students. It happens to benefit underrepresented minority students slightly more, but it actually benefits all students to do it. And so looking at that, where's my darn finger? So just to illustrate this point, so I'm going to explain what these two panels are, or what the speaker is. Panel 1 is the KII, that's basically a knowledge inventory. This is the paper Ballin 2017. It's a knowledge inventory. That inventory is based upon Bloom's taxonomy. If you have heard the term Bloom's taxonomy, it's actually something from back in the 50s, where a guy named Benjamin Bloom came up with this kind of hierarchy. It's probably not the best way to phrase it as a hierarchy, but it's, you know, are we asking simple regurgitory type questions, or are we asking higher order critical thinking questions that require analysis and synthesis and things like that? So they created this inventory based upon Bloom's taxonomy, and then they posed the inventory to the students. And so what we're seeing here, so in 2014, so this is everything on the left is 2014. So this is 2014, this is 2014, this is 2014, this is 2014. In 2014, they assessed a class, a straight up traditional lecture, stage on stage, death by PowerPoint, traditional lecture class, asking how students did. So this knowledge inventory, and they asked underrepresented minority students and non-underrepresented minority students. So this is comparing a stage on a stage traditional lecture with an active learning class. So that's huge. So obviously the asterisk identifies statistically significant. What we're seeing here is that non-URM students, they benefit, but it certainly doesn't hurt them to do active learning in their classes, and they're benefiting. But underrepresented minority students are benefiting significantly in an active learning classroom. And so it was and just to give you some experimental design, it was the same professors, it was the same class, it was the same content, they just taught it differently from one semester to the next. Yes?
Is this a specific topic or?
This was an introductory biology course at Cornell. So, and again, I'm happy to send the PDF to anybody that wants it. So, and then this is course grades. So this was that active, or the knowledge inventory, and these are course grades. So we have C all the way up to an A. Again, what we're seeing is it is significantly impacting underrepresented minority students in a traditional versus an active learning class, and then we don't see much movement in terms of statistically significant movement in our non-URM students. But the point is this helps everybody, but it really seems to help underrepresented minority students. So another type of, and we've touched on this, another type of active learning, and there are several faculty in here that are actually engaged in this. It's called a CURE, Course-Based Undergraduate Research Experience. CUREs have been around for a little while, but we haven't been doing a whole lot of specific cures specifically because there's some specific rules about what makes a cure a cure. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of what's different about a cure versus undergraduate research. So undergraduate research, traditional undergraduate research, my background is in biology. So I remember when I was a junior or a senior, I said, okay, well, if I want to go to graduate school or whatever it is that I wanted to do at that time, I'm going to need a letter from somebody, right? And so if I need a letter, I have to do something for that letter. And so I want to go and do some research. So I'm going to go and talk to Dr. Colley and say, Dr. Colley, hi, I really enjoyed your class, and I have a 3.8 GPA, and I want to do this, that, and the other. Do you have any room in your lab? Okay? And he would say, he would ask me some additional questions. Probably the first question he's going to ask me is, how long can you be in my lab? Because it's going to take me a semester to teach you how to pipette. and if that's all I'm going to get out of you, then this probably isn't going to work for us all. So these are all, immediately there are barriers to entry into that undergraduate research experience, right? A traditional undergraduate research experience. However, if you build your course curriculum, like Dr. Gallahan has been doing with her cancer biology class, if you build your curriculum around analyzing data, that's a cure, basically. That's the big difference. There's no barrier to entry. The only barrier to entry is, are you registered for the course? And so students are exposed to research. They're exposed to how it impacts their community. They're exposed to how it impacts them individually. See the link there? That's cool. I love when links happen, right? So, and then other undergraduate research experiences. So that's not to say, I kind of painted this dichotomy, this picture of, well, traditional undergraduate research bad, cure is good. That's not what I mean. I'm just talking about the barrier to entry piece. Other undergraduate research experiences that are more traditional, like doing a summer project, that's great, that's huge, because that's mentorship, right? That's an opportunity for you to create to foster that fire of curiosity that's in your students. Because when they see that you're going to invest time in them, then they're going to have a sense of loyalty to you, and they're going to stick around. And Nathan brought this up earlier, and I promise he wasn't a plant just for the slide. But team-based learning is another excellent active learning strategy, right? But it can be done well, it can be done poorly. Just like lecture can be done well and lecture can be done poorly, right? So I'm not saying lecture bad, active learning good, right? That's not necessarily the case, because I have seen a lot of active learning done very badly. Just because you're throwing all the utensils you have in the kitchen at it doesn't mean it's going to be good. So it's all about tools and using the right tool for the right job. But to elaborate on this point of team-based learning, let's say, for instance, you're trying to figure out how you want to set up your teams, and you might just go for the whole random things, like, okay, everybody pick a team. Well, you could be more intentional about it. In fact, the literature recommends that we be more intentional about it. So, for instance, you can have a team of all men. That's fine. You can have a team of all women. That's fine. You can have a team of 2 men and 2 women. That's fine. So when you start making more of a heterogeneous team, it's great if you want to have 2 or 3 women and 1 man, but you don't want to do it the other way around. 2 or 3 men and 1 woman, because what have you just done?
Yeah, Harold.
Okay.
No, if there's a single woman in a group of men, she's much less likely to speak out unless she's a really bold person.
That's a great point. I was talking with Dr. Gallahan about she has a similar situation that actually turned out opposite. But anything can happen, but what you're doing is kind of stacking the deck against her, right? The same rules apply with underrepresented minority students. So if you can be intentional about it, if you're not trying to do groups with 200 students, and I understand that some of us are trying to do groups with 200 students, and you can't be that micromanaging with that process, but if you can, try to think about some of these things. Yes, 2 comments, back in the back there.
This, I think it's right now limiting to how to form teams, but the actual team-based learning is front end, the team, and the back end too. So there are different instructional approaches that needs to be attached to this team-based learning, and you have to really be focused on that. A lot of, for example, pharmacy education, colleges are now approaching to this team-based learning because if they feel like this is really helping them to do their jobs in the real world properly, but they're struggling with, front end and back end.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're discussing this, just try to think about what other strategies will I plug it in together with this team or group work type of things to make sure that you're really designing the whole instruction in the proper way.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate you bringing up that point. And unfortunately, each of these things that I'm bringing up is a workshop by itself, right? And so we have offered some workshops, and we'll continue to offer workshops on team-based learning, how to do it. How to actually do active learning, because it's easy to stand up here and say you should do active learning, but then not tell you how to do it, right? A lot of what we're doing with our STEP program and STEM Core with their seminars is how do you implement and deploy these different techniques. But thank you for bringing that up, because a couple of years ago there was a college, I think it was ASEE, I'm not sure, basically the engineering education arm of the American Society of Engineering, did a paper trying to find out what industry wanted. What they found out was lacking in students. And I pointed at Shema, because Shema is a professor over in College of Engineering, College of Engineering, Chemical Engineering Department. And we talk a lot about this, but and one of the major things that they said that they wanted from their students, or that was kind of something that they pointed out that wasn't so great, is that they can't work in teams. They said their communication is poor, they write poorly, and they don't know how to work in teams. So that's industry telling us what we're not doing, right? So so thank you for bringing that up, and we can talk more about that if we can, because we're going to have time for some discussion.
I do have one.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of that, to three women and 1 man type thing.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I foresee with that type of group is that that's not the reality of industry.
True.
And so you're giving these women a false sense, or underrepresented minorities, a false sense of what's actually out there. And so by tailoring these particular groups in this way, you don't help mentor them to find their voice as they move forward.
That's very true. And I agree with that 100%, but would you agree that it requires a little more management on your part as an instructor?
Yes.
Yes. So if you're putting, so you had a counterpoint to
Yeah,
that?
just to her point, and I think that's a valid point. What the research also says about grouping or teaming strategies is that you have to constantly change your groups of team. You don't stick with one team throughout the semester. That's not going to help the students at all. So that could be, giving different teams based on these categories, or not just this, man and woman. This is gender based. You can do ethnicity based, ability based, different types of grouping strategies will give you a different context, a different situation, which you can easily flexibly use that when you go into the real world setting.
Yeah, for sure. I know that there are many ways to skin a cat, right? Well, technically, atomically, there's only one way to skin a cat. But, sorry, that was a joke. Tough crowd, yeah. But yeah, there are more than one way or 2 ways to form groups, and yes, the best ways that we see groups happening is if they're fluid and dynamic. so, yeah. So to transition a little bit, so we talked about where we are and what we've been doing, and we've talked about now what we might be able to do to move forward to address some of those gaps. But here's this kind of this great way to implement or dovetail research into education, into what we're doing into our classroom, right? Because we cannot move forward in terms of transformation, institutional transformation, unless we have good data, unless we know that what we're doing works, you know? So we can do all this active learning and co-curricular activities and mentorship programs and all of that, but are we paying attention to its efficacy? There's the research piece. There's the money piece, right? So we all can agree that bench research dollars are drying up, right? So it's harder and harder to get money from a federal agency to do our bench research. But what we're also seeing is that opportunities for research dollars are becoming more plentiful for education-based research, or so-called discipline-based education research, DEBR, you've heard that. Specifically within, guess what? STEM, right? So you've got NSF and NIH, DOD, DOE, Department of Energy, not education, but DOE education as well, throwing money at institutions for this particular opportunity. So when we're making these intentional changes to what we're doing around campus, think of experimental design as you are making those changes. Can you turn that into a manuscript? Can you turn that into a publication, a grant proposal? All the above. So as you're thinking about changes that you can make, how can you track that? How can you determine if the changes that you're making are working? That's where the resources that I'm hoping that you're aware of will come in. So the STEP program, the program that I run, which is a faculty development program specifically for STEM faculty, we're doing projects all the time with various people participating in our program about, looking at the changes that are being made in the classroom. STEM Core is, looking at the opportunities for grantsmanship and looking at opportunities for looking at data in the changes that we're making. And then specifically, there are partners across campus that maybe aren't so obvious, that maybe we don't know about. These are the so-called DEBR folks, discipline-based educational researchers. I will point out Dr. Beth Thacker, who is in physics. If there's anybody on campus that is a true dyed-in-the-wool, his classically trained DEBR person, it is Dr. Thacker. And so reach out to people like Dr. Thacker. I dabble in DEBR. Dr. Colley dabbles in DEBR. Dr. Gallahan dabbles in DEBR. Dr. Harris, Dr. T. A lot of folks dabble in DEBR as we can, but Beth is doing it, full time. So there are folks that want to do more of this and have some experience doing it. So reach out, and if you don't know who to reach out to, let me know, and I can put you in touch with the right people.
Yeah, you can STEM Core, that's one of our functions, is to try to bring teams together and put people in contact. Because we've heard from faculty, STEM faculty before that, they want to do this, they don't know how to do this, and then the assessment piece scares the living daylights out of them, which I know it did for me when I first started, because I was like, I don't even know where to even start. But started working with people in the College of Education who are more than willing to help do all the assessment piece and help you formulate the right kinds of questions and tools that you need to turn this into something that can be published, something that NSF would want to fund, or the other agencies. So we can definitely help you from STEM Core to put you in touch with the right people as well.
Yeah. So, Dr.
Probably Vitality sorting, another thing, partnering with IRB. So if you're gonna collect and publish, IRB.
Yeah.
For sure.
So,
Even if it's just general information from your students and it's not part of your, I just called to ask about your syllabus and you want to use it for any research purpose, IRB.
right. So there are two agencies, if you will, or boards on campus that focus on responsible use of experimental subjects. One is for all animals, that's IACUC, Institutional Care and Use Committee, and then there's the human part, Institutional Review Board. And so if you want to go down this route, and IRB has been fantastic in the last few years with helping you figure out what questions to ask and how to get there so that they can support your research in this endeavor.
Just piggybacking on that, I just talked to the VPR the other day, and he said you can call the IRB, but you can also ask them to have one-on-one consultation for you to get to the proposal or even like the white paper and things like that. So he was encouraging us to really just contact and set up the time to meet and get some help on that too.
Yeah, Dr. Gallahan and I just had a really great experience with the IRB. So yeah, they're definitely helpful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Experience is about the application or prepare or what?
So basically, it's part of the process is explaining to the IRB what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So whatever the experiment is that you're wanting to do, you need to be able to justify that it's okay to do it. And they will help you in the process in kind of tailoring your language to make sure that that you're saying what you mean to say. And
it's a lengthy process, right?
It's not as lengthy, it's not as bad. And of course, it depends on what you're doing. If it's a basic survey, you would probably fall under non-exempt status. I mean, this is not an IRB. I am not with the IRB, and I'm certainly not an expert on IRB. But what you're doing, if it's very non-invasive, it might just simply be a survey. They're going to be okay. But if it's something a little more involved, and you want to pay them, and it's going to be maybe worth course credit or not, then yes, that can make it more lengthy. But the more complex the experiment, the more complex the application.
Maybe one way is to submit the application. There is a way for their feedback. We went through this way, and it took us months to learn from it.
It can.
Another way is maybe we can meet with them to discuss. Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, they usually have somebody that triages your application. So before it goes to the full board, if it has to go to the full board, so when you send in your initial application, there is a staff member that is there that triages your application, so they figure out where it needs to go. Okay. And then if it's a more complex application and needs to go to an IRB board member, or it doesn't need to go to the full IRB for approval by a committee. Again, the more complex, the longer it will take.
But this is just a joke that we say in education. If you're not putting needles to your students or your participant, it's not that bad going through the IRB, especially if you're doing surveys, interviews, or collecting some students' artifacts along the way in the course. It's not that difficult.
Right. What I don't want is for you to think that is a barrier for entry for you to move into discipline-based educational research. If you're pausing now because you're like, oh geez, I don't feel like going through that. That sounds 6 months. That's crazy. Nah, it's okay. Talk to us. We can put you in touch with the right people to find out, to ask the right questions. Because odds are, if you're just now interested in moving into it, you're not going to have that complex of a study anyway, right? So don't. I get 6 months. I get that. I've been there. But don't let that be a barrier to entry for you. Okay, so with our remaining time, which is about 15 minutes, we're right on time. This is a call to action. Okay, so what are you going to do? We talked about where some of our barriers are, where some of our gaps are. We've talked about what some of our action items could be. Hopefully during this conversation, you've been thinking, okay, well, I could try this, or I could try that. What I'd like for you to do is take 1 minute individually and think about what you might do. And then at the end of that minute, and it's literally going to be 1 minute, then I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor at your table and listen, actively listen. A lot of times what we do when we do this whole turn to your neighbor thing is that we start thinking in our own minds what we're going to say if we're called on. I don't want you to do that. I want you to think about, I want you to listen to what your colleague is saying, because I would like for you to report out what they say. Okay, so let's take 1 minute, go. So let's talk about it a little bit. So, does anybody want to volunteer a great action idea? We're going to write these down, because if we make it, if we put it on paper, then it's going to happen, right? So, yes, Darren.
Well, just one idea, we already had a few before this conversation today, but one thing we're going to try to think about doing is putting some of our key documents and web pages in Spanish.
Ooh.
Which is tricky, right, to accomplish, because I'm not fluent in Spanish. But I think if you're going to say, you know, we want these students to get to the resources and their families to know about the resources, then we need to put it in a language that is accessible. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure we need to find out who on campus could help with that.
So part of the HSI committee, we've had these discussions about turning like as many websites as we can into bilingual, and then but there was in that discussion like there's not really a central place on campus that'll do it for you.
Can you use it as a project for a student? Maybe
You could use it, yeah,
language
potentially,
department?
like, yeah, maybe that might be way, like, some math.
Yeah, then I just worried, like, about I don't know, I won't be able to test the quality of that, right? So then I'll have to have testers, I guess, because if a student does it and I think it's great, but it's really not, I won't know.
Right.
Yeah, and then, so there was some staff in that meeting that were like, well, I'm fluent in Spanish, but maybe I should be compensated if I'm gonna have to.
Right, absolutely.
You know, I shouldn't, because that's not part of my
That's a
job
skill.
description, yeah, so anyway,
But anyway, to look at
So
how,
it's there,
how
yeah.
can we do that, what are
Yeah.
the resources, how much does it cost?
Yeah, that's a great idea, and something we better start thinking about. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
can let the student do the project and just hire someone who will look at it afterwards. So they'll be active in something and they'll feel like they're contributing.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Bree had a really good idea in terms of resources. She's been accumulating professional resources and correct me where I go wrong, but different outlets and web links that student and activities that students can do to help them to identify what they could do post-graduation and put it in a folder on her website in her class.
Okay.
I have 300 students, so I can't meet with them individually, but if they want to download it and work through it, cool. We can make it accessible,
Web-based resource.
like the digital mentor or something.
Oh, nice. I like that. Resource on careers. I'm gonna put digital mentor. Because a lot of students have no idea what to do with a biology degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what do I, well, aside from going to medical school or graduate school, what do I do with this, right? A ton of stuff you could do. Nice. Depending on where you live, depending on what you, yeah.
The one idea that came up after we talked with the student and when I'm looking at the list you had for the resource, when I had the idea of mentoring or when I had the vision of it, I thought it was student for student.
Okay.
And it seemed like there's nothing like this on campus. If we had student in the same department, because obviously it's easier when they're knowing what they're talking about, second year, third year, senior, who will mentor someone who's just started.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be one-on-one meeting. Obviously it will be easier to have African American who will mentor African American or Hispanic who, because they'll coming from the same community, they have the same similar culture, so it'll be easier for them to communicate. And that will help them. How do I register to classes? Which classes you should be avoid because you always get fail there.
Right.
And building something like this, obviously we're gonna need to have a grant to build something like this because we're gonna have to have resource, but it could decrease the amount of students that will leave college just because they don't know what to do because they'll have someone they can talk to.
There is a proposal, Erin and I are both familiar with this, it's currently in process right now in the provost office. I think it's tentatively titled a Presidential Fellow, that is aimed at upper level students who participated in something like Mentor Tech or another student program to encourage them to be mentors. back. So I do know of a proposal in the works right now that does much of what you're saying.
Okay.
So if you're interested in that idea, Genevieve Durham de Cesaro is the person to talk to, and that's being pursued right now on campus.
Lauren had a good idea, to chime in, to kind of add some idea of like cultural awareness or bias, either discussion or training or just personal reflection to your like group work or to your student, your class, some way, depending on easier to do in some ways in a smaller class versus like a much larger. But I think that's a really good idea too. I don't know how much you want to approach it as a FAFSA number, but I think it's really important.
An add-on to that, Bree, like I to support that. So I don't remember where I was, but I heard somebody that was a math and professor at another university talking about. It goes back to your motivation question, Lauren. That she gave the example if she had a student who came in, he was Hispanic, into her class and said, "I can't learn math. I just can't do it." Like, had that attitude, and what she did is she made him write, I think, like a short paper. She made him go find a Hispanic mathematician, because he said, "My people don't do that. We don't do math." And so she made him find a Hispanic mathematician that he could write about, and then she said after she made him do that, he got in and he excelled at math. So, and this made me think of, I've been somewhere else before where people have talked about you can introduce diversity into your classroom by simply introducing diverse scientists, physicists, engineers. And so for the URM that's sitting in the room and they're looking around and there's like 2 of them, and the person in front definitely isn't one of them, and they got this imposter syndrome, like maybe I'm really not supposed to be here, and you introduce the cool Hispanic physicist, blah, 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 they kind of get some buy-in because they're like, oh wait, what? It goes back to what one of the students said going to the SACNAS conference and hearing of other people. They're like, wait, my people do that? What? Like, mind blown. And then they buy in, and so maybe their motivation, and that's all you had to do was,
Liz, thank you.
This was not one of our ideas, but to follow up on that, for those of you who are faculty in different departments, for the love of God, invite diverse people to give your departmental seminars.
Yes.
There's lists out there. I know I'm an ecologist, and Meg Duffy, who's at the University of Michigan, has an entire list that's called Diversify EEP, that people can sign up and put what they do, what groups they belong to. I mean, it's everything from just getting more women involved, LGBTQ, URMs. It makes a huge, I'm not a faculty member, but it makes a huge difference to students when that happens.
I mean, I definitely agree that we need education as faculty. Like, I don't see a lot of my colleagues, to be honest, coming to some of these sessions to educate themselves. Like, I'm trying to educate myself with a lot of different things. But if it's not like mandatory or it's not like regularly like reinforced, we tend to forget that too. So like those regular reinforcements, some mandatory training, just like Title IX or 7, that can sometimes help too.
So a solution for number 5, if anyone wants to collaborate, people may or may not be familiar with the Women in Science Wikipedia focus group, which is focused on finding factual sources from informational resources and citing those in Wikipedia. I've worked towards doing this project in math, collecting facts related to this. I'd be happy to start a Wikipedia group, and I think this would be a great way for students to engage, so to participate in finding a fact, and then having that appear as a page or a new page in Wikipedia, on a page or in a page of Wikipedia, would be a great way of actually having them contribute back to the community with that information.
Cool. We'll do one more, and then because we're slightly over time, but I want to get Beth in.
No, I can't see your list, but I'll just stop. I'm actually more interested from the teaching, learning, and research and grade getting aspect. I know the whole history of what happened in physics at FIU, which is Florida International, which is what 70 or 80% has been. It's tremendous. But they turned everything around, and one of the things they did was they put evidence-based courses in. And the whole physics department taught by evidence-based materials, and they went and they got a lot of grants to do this, which was really nice from NSF. And they focused on it, and it's just like your plots. I mean, there's a tremendous improvement for underrepresented students. In physics, that includes women. And so they were helping the majority of students in doing this. And so changing the way we teach, especially at the introductory level, is a useful thing to do. And like I said, they also got grants to do this, so you can tie it into research and to getting grants and things like that. So I just want to put that piece in.
Thank you. These are all great ideas, and I know that there are more, and we couldn't get to them all, and Erin is doing something that I hope that everybody would do, is take a picture of this, because hopefully it will jog your memory when you scroll through your pictures again, that we do have the power to do something about this. So I want to thank you all for your input, for listening to our student panel, for your great questions for our student panel. This is an ongoing conversation, right? Lauren?
Can we make a listserv for this group?
We can. We have the technology, we can build it. We can make it stronger, faster.
Yeah, because I think our hope is that this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, because the reality is that those students, with the changing demographics in the US, the changing demographics in the state of Texas, and the fact that we're a public institution, these students aren't going anywhere. And if we don't get on board and on the ship and steer it in the right way, we're gonna have, everybody, all these classes will be eligible for SI, because the failing rates will, I mean, that's just the reality of where we're headed. And so we're hoping that this is just the beginning of the conversation, and that we can work together to go after money. I know we don't want to make it about the money, but the reality is there's going to be a lot of resources out there financially that we can bring that money here to make the opportunities available to all students, because it'll benefit everybody.
I'd like to ask very quickly, just so we all know who we can ask for help from. If you are directly affiliated with either the STEP program or STEM Court, would you raise your hand?
Yeah.
So, if you have questions, or if you want to talk more about this stuff, if you want to know what the heck active learning is, find one of us that had our hand up, because we'd love to talk to you about it. So thank you so much. If you have additional questions, please reach out to me or anybody else that raised their hand, and grab a cookie on the way out if you haven't already. Thank you.